vision or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura. And for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 12th issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Too many books? Mendel Umener faced a crisis when his landlord objected to the 10,000 volumes in his New York studio apartment. By Alex Vadukul. For a young Jewish scholar and writer named Mendel Umener, books are the wellspring of enlightenment. So when he scored a studio apartment a block away from Central Park on Manhattan's Upper East Side a year ago, he brought his books with them. All 10,000 of them. What followed, at least for a little while, was a charmed existence in his 600-square-foot temple of knowledge. Towering stacks of Judaica lined the walls, heaps of film criticism and opera history filled the pre-war bathroom, piles of plays and poems blocked a window, and Umener slept on a floor mattress engulfed in dog-eared novels. Waking up around noon, he spent his afternoons on his sunlit chaise, devouring the works of Yiddish writers like Chaim Grade and critics like Edmund Wilson, nourishing his mind while the city churned outside. "I am always reading," Umener 31 said. "I'm reading to extract knowledge. Every book I own, I need. My library is my manual for life." He worked as a freelance Hebrew translator and used the apartment as the headquarters for his fledgling literary journal, Notikron Review, hosting parties that gained a reputation among quarters of New York's literary underclass. Striving writers drank beer among the teetering stacks while arguing over foreign affairs and Greek poetry. The stacks kept rising as Umener added his hauls from thrift shops, book dealers, and eBay deliveries. "I don't think of myself as a hoarder," he said, "but I guess my building did." This past winter, he received a notice from building management. "You are violating a substantial obligation of your tenancy," it began. "You are maintaining the premises in a severely overcluttered condition, permitting the over-accumulation of books in the premises, creating a fire hazard by over-accumulating combustible books in the premises." "I opened this letter," Umener recalled, "and they're telling me my books are a fire hazard, that I have to be out if I don't get rid of them." After he did not heed the warning, eviction proceedings began. He decided to fight back in court. One afternoon last month, Umener stood amid the leaning towers, savoring his unruly paradise while he still could. As klezmer music played from his phone, he ran his hand across the spines of the Russian theater after Stalin and the Kurdish question in Iraq. He tenderly held up a book of poems by Abraham Reason, a Yiddish writer he was smitten with. "Sure, maybe I'm a little different," he said, "and I know my library might seem excessive to some, but it's not as excessive as people might think. In rabbinic household, no one would blink twice at a library like mine. Reading is a part of my culture." He descended the building's opulent staircase and lit up a Marlboro on the sidewalk. "I thought I'd found peace here, that I'd start my magazine here," he said. "Maybe I'll need to stop growing my library for a while. But I feel I always need to be learning, because that's what I think I have to offer the world." Raised in a Hasidic enclave of Crown Heights, Mendel grew up speaking Yiddish with his grandparents, listening to the teachings of his bearded rabbi uncles, and attending troika dances in banquet halls. His father, a pious real estate broker named Isaac, relished studying the Torah with him. But the boy craved literature. At 12, he was reading Dostoevsky. In his teens, Umener attended Rabbinical Seminary, where he embraced Talmudic study. Lessons began at 7 a.m. and ended with nights of vodka-fueled argument with the rabbis. My days were spent studying texts in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Yiddish, and I sometimes went a whole year without seeing a woman's face. But I was also disobedient and incorrigible, he said. I was always reading what I wanted to read, not only what they wanted me to read. But that's where you assert yourself, where you form your opinions, where you make your own sense of the world. If I form an opinion and there are books saying the opposite, I need to read them all to know if I'm justified, he continued. If I'm not convinced, I should let my conviction go. In his early 20s, as he grew engrossed in Ovid and Rousseau, he befriended writers at Café Reggio in Greenwich Village and found himself browsing more at the Strand than at the Judaica. 1 year before his ordination, he turned away from the path set out for him. It dawned on me I wasn't as much of a true believer as I thought I was, he said. Maybe it upset my grandparents, but I decided I should just go do what I wanted to do, which was enter the modern liberal cultural society of New York. I didn't want to be drunk on medieval piety anymore. His mother, Dina Umner, said she wasn't surprised by his secular turn. It tracked with the curious boy he always was, she said. Even when he was little, he would try to convince us of things through argument. A little bit of knowledge was never enough for him. After putting away his kippah, Umner enrolled at Columbia University to study film and philosophy. Outside the classroom, he interned at Tablet magazine. After graduating at 27, he met a young woman from Paris. He soon ventured to her home city, where the romance came to an end. She kicked me out of her apartment, but I stayed in Paris until I spent my last dollar, Umner said. I smoked gitans in the Marais. I got robbed in the subway. They had the best politics journals and literary magazines. Paris changed me. He spent hours at the bookstands along the Seine, reading journals like Nouvelle Revue Française and Connaissance des Arts. He found his vocation. These French journals had people making arguments in ways that really mattered, he said. So much of our writing here is about you must choose a lane. Theirs has a comfort with controversy, a precision in argument, a sense of historic consciousness that we need more of. Back in New York, Umner decided to start a publication of his own, Notarikon Review, an eclectic journal that will publish people who don't agree on everything, he said. Some of the writers he has recruited are former social media adversaries. The debut print issue, scheduled to come out later this year, will include fiction by Julia Kornberg, an essay by Haley Jean Clark about the artist Anna Weyant, and a translation of a Yiddish short story by Abraham Reason. Umner conducted his first editorial meeting over pizza and beer on the floor of his Upper East Side studio. On a recent afternoon, he went browsing at the Marazi bookstore in Marine Park, Brooklyn. When he entered the aisles packed with ancient Jewish texts and leather-brown Torahs, the store's owner, Israel Mizrahi, warmly greeted him as Mendy. I think Jews have an almost mystical relationship with books and knowledge, Mizrahi said. We're always reliving our past, creating a thirst for knowledge, which is why a Jewish home needs a library. But Mendy's insatiable curiosity stands out from all of my customers. He understands that physical books are the only way we can truly retain knowledge. I've seen him spend 3 hours here in random conversation with someone about the kinds of horses used by 18th century Polish Jews. He had heard about Umner's apartment troubles. Of all the vices, I find books to be the least dangerous, Mizrahi said. I think it's possible his landlord might have their priorities misplaced, or might not understand him. If you're not steeped in his culture, Maybe his library does look chaotic, but I'd argue it only looks like a mess. I bet he can tell you where every single book is in his apartment. After months of slow legal jousting, Uminer finally resigned himself to moving out of 6 East 65th Street, which is owned by the Hakim Organization, a company founded by the New York real estate magnate Carmen Hakim. I don't want to be here if I'm not wanted, he said. The Hakim Organization and the building's management company did not reply to requests for comment. On a hot Friday, a few friends arrived to help Uminer with his move. They tamed the heaps of towers of books into neat piles that could be placed into boxes. "Why has God cursed us with this heat?" Uminer said. "God doesn't curse us, Mendel. We curse ourselves," replied Julian Kozma, a filmmaker. "Well, I didn't mean it in Spinzonic sense. I just meant it's a hot day for moving." While Uminer took a smoke break, Kozma heaved books into boxes. "It makes sense to me that Mendel, a Brooklyn yeshiva kid, would come to the Upper East Side and make this world for himself here, only to get rejected from it," Kozma said. "There's a New York now keyed into professionalism and uniformity that sees a guy like him and thinks something must be wrong. There's an element to the city now that's hostile to the life of the mind, to the eccentricity that might produce it." More friends stopped by. As they disassembled the library, the walls grew more and more unobscured. Finally, it was time to take the boxes to the van outside. The sky darkened and a hard rain began to fall. Wearing shorts and tivas, Uminer led the charge, dashing into the downpour with a box of medieval Italian plays. His friends followed, getting soaked as they deposited their hauls into the vehicle. Drenched, they headed back to the apartment. Uminer ordered pierogies and stroganoff blinis from the Russian Samovar restaurant to reward his helpers while they kept backing. As night fell, the room turned into a salon crackling with arguments and discussions about Nabokov's early Russian poetry, about foreign affairs in Lebanon, about the French Romantic writer Charles Nodier. Among those holding forth was Katya Danziger, an art history student at Columbia. "Mendel lives in his mind," she said, "and he can take that with him anywhere." "I heard he's found a bigger apartment," Danziger added. "So that means more books." Doctors warn of a dangerous trend, microwaving a popular squishy toy. Hospitals are seeing cases of children suffering serious burns amid a social media trend involving popping Nido cubes into microwaves. By Danny Blum. Doctors are warning parents about a trend on social media that involves microwaving Nido cubes, squishy dough-like toys, after cases of children having suffered serious burns. In January, a 9-year-old boy in Plainfield, Illinois, microwaved one of the popular Nido toys before school after hearing about the trend from a friend. The toy exploded, sending scalding goo splattering onto his face and hands and burning him, according to Kelly McElliott, the burn outreach coordinator at the Loyola Medicine Burn Center, which, she said, has seen about 5 cases related to the toys earlier this year. When the toy exploded, the boy screamed. He had burns on his face and hands, and one of his eyes was swollen shut. His mother took him to the emergency room. He spent a night in the hospital after he was transferred to a burn center and found to have suffered second-degree burns. Ms. McElliott said she heard similar stories from other burn centers. Some children have been burned after leaving the toys in hot cars. Most of the burns have been second degree, which are excruciatingly painful and can lead to scarring. When we say second degree, that means it's blistered, it's open, it's painful, said Dr. Alicia Savtamal, director of the Connecticut Burn Center at Bridgeport Hospital. Dr. Savtamal said she had treated an elementary school-age child whose face was burned after microwaving a Nido toy. Roughly a half dozen reports submitted to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, a government agency, described children and teenagers receiving emergency care after the toys burst open when they were heated. In a statement, Paul Weingard, the president of Schilling, which makes Nido toys, said the company had partnered with social media companies like TikTok to remove influential content containing Nido product misuse. The company has also included a safety warning on Nido packaging. Ensuring the safety of our consumers is fundamental for Schilling, Mr. Weingard said. The toys are extraordinarily popular. Mr. Weingard told Business Insider that the company has sold a year's worth of inventory in just the first 9 weeks this year. Doctors said that parents should not panic, but that they should be aware of the risks and talk to their children about the toys. Some summer camps and schools have banned the products. It seems like it shouldn't have to be said, but sometimes we do need to have what feels like obvious conversations with our kids, said Dr. Elizabeth Murray, an emergency medicine pediatrician in Rochester, and a spokeswoman for the American Academy of Pediatrics. I think this is a great opportunity for parents to have those conversations with their kids about navigating what we see online, she added. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Can a workout be a sport? Xenom, a new fitness company, wants to make weekend warriors feel like pros. By Callum Marsh. At 8 a.m. on a recent Saturday, nearly 24 men, their faces set in expressions of nervous determination, strode onto the floor of the Star Arena in Frisco, Texas. The group included software engineers, salesmen, retired police officers, and dads in their 40s. As they took their places under the blazing floodlights, the crowd went wild. Which of these gladiators will emerge victorious? Roared Noah Dean, an upbeat MC in a cowboy hat. The men gripped barbells. As the blast of an air horn sounded, they heaved hundreds of pounds above their heads. Welcome to Xenom. Part exercise class, part competition. It is a fitness company that gives its customers a chance to pit themselves against one another in weightlifting, running, gymnastics, and other high-intensity workouts. Many of the workouts are drawn from CrossFit, the fitness company founded in California in 2000 that is an official partner of Xenom. At Xenom Week, a Xenom weekend includes 10 events devised to test the participants' strength, barbell lifts, speed, a 3-kilometer run, and agility, handstand push-ups and pull-ups, not to mention the endurance needed to make it through the long days in one piece. The non-committed need not apply. But the real purpose of Xenom is to make ordinary workout fiends feel like pros. It's a kind of fantasy camp that the company founder, Keith Barlow, likened to Disney World. Just as Disney theme parks transport visitors to an ideal childhood, Xenom offers its customers a chance to imagine themselves as Olympians or gladiators, if only for a couple of days. It's about making you feel like a superstar, like the athlete you know you are inside, Barlow said. The only thing that matters here is whether I send these 500 people away from the event feeling like the hero of their own story. Barlow said that Xenom has spent more than $1 million to mount the weekend event, its first at the Star Arena. He added that the scale would only expand as Xenom moved on to other cities, starting with London and Miami later this year. On the competition floor, the money was visible in production values that suggested a televised sporting event. Hundreds of staff members, judges, and volunteers in matching uniforms marshaled the competitors in and out of position. Large digital displays showed countdowns and running split times. The participants could avail themselves of sports massages in a booth opposite the warm-up area. Every piece of equipment, from the gymnastics ring to the plates, bars, and dumbbells around the arena, looked new. Nearly every surface had Xenom branding. For an inaugural event, it was all run very smoothly. Theo de Hoyos, a member of the armed forces in his 50s who competed this weekend, said on Sunday night, "Not a lot of hiccups or problems. It seemed thought out." The company can afford to go big, for the time being. Because of the $15 million in capital that Barlow has raised, most of it from Wunderco, the technology investment firm operated by the former Disney chair Jeffrey Katzenberg. Barlow's pitch to Katzenberg was based on a study he had commissioned. It found that an estimated 2 million people work out in CrossFit's worldwide network of almost 10,000 gyms, and another 2 million regularly put themselves through CrossFit-inspired workouts. This combined group of 4 million men and women are desperate for competition, where they can put their training to the test, Barlow told Katzenberg. CrossFit has its own competition, the CrossFit Games, which first took place nearly 20 years ago. But those are for the top 150 or so athletes from around the world, and the winners take home hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money. Even smaller scale CrossFit events attract professional level participants. It was Barlow's contention that everyday workout enthusiasts would welcome the chance to feel like the best of the best. At the first Xenom weekend, an elite division included Emily Rolfe and Colton Mertens, 2 CrossFit stars who competed alongside the amateurs. "It was pretty incredible to be at an event where you're next to competitive athletes," Nate Den, a senior master sergeant in the Air Force in his 40s, said. Xenom is banking on the idea that CrossFit, which has had business troubles and leadership changes in recent years, may have missed an opportunity by limiting its games to elite athletes. Barlow envisions 2,000 participants at each Xenom weekend and hopes that there will eventually be dozens each year. In this, he has some experience. As the co-founder of the publicity firm Fittest PR, Barlow has worked with the fitness race HYROX since its inception, helping to scale its event from 500 racers in small-town Germany to more than 1.6 million people who will participate in HYROX races in cities around the world this year. But while HYROX is intended as a simple, accessible challenge without any high-skill barbell or gymnastics movements, Xenom requires much more dedicated training and expertise, potentially limiting its mass appeal. Xenom is not intended as a competitor to HYROX, Barlow said, adding that it is in a completely different category. "We are a premium luxury product," he said. "We are not an event that needs millions of people to do it at $100 a ticket. We need 100,000 people to do it at $500, $600, or $700 per ticket." It's a steep price, particularly for CrossFitters, whose demographics skew toward law enforcement and members of the military. Barlow thinks they will pay because they are absolutely obsessive. He likened his audience to those who pay upward of $1,000 to take part in Ironman races. "These people train 5 times per week," he said, "do physio work, care about nutrition, treat themselves like a professional athlete. That's our consumer." More than half of those who took part in the recent competition didn't pay the $500 entry fee, since Xenom gave away several hundred tickets in sweepstakes and raffles in order to generate word of mouth. "You need to put enough out on the market for free so that it builds awareness and people understand what it is," Barlow said. "It's like the software business." The hope is that the spectacle, the rush of doing grueling workouts on a world-class stage with lights and music, will convince amateurs that $500 is a small price to pay to feel like pros. During one of the weekend's final events, a 20-year-old Texan named Landon Yates pulled ahead of the competitors in a burpee race. "It's Landon! Landon is ahead, ladies and gentlemen," the announcer exclaimed. The audience of several hundred people, made up mainly of the participants' friends and family members, whooped and cheered. At his home gym in Abilene, Texas, Yates is just another regular who likes to stay fit. Out on the arena floor, he seemed like a star. The question is whether that's enough to sustain Xenom's ambitious business plan. Barlow was optimistic. "If you go and ask anyone here whether they are considering doing another Xenom, I will be genuinely surprised if they say no," he said. At the end of the weekend, Den, the Air Force Senior Master Sergeant, was picking up an event memento, a bracelet with Xenom printed on the side. He said he had made the trip to Texas from his hometown in Alabama after scoring a ticket in a giveaway. "I think I'd do it again," Den said, "but I'm not sure I'd pay $500. Can couture be minimalist? In her Fendi debut, Maria Grazia Chiuri makes the case and wrestles with a complicated legacy. By Vanessa Friedman. 41 years ago, Karl Lagerfeld, then creative director of Fendi, mounted an exhibition at the National Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art in Rome, the city where the brand was born and is based. Titled Steps Through Work, an effort to show the public the art that went into the creation of a fur coat, from sketch to realization, it caused a scandal. Though not for the reasons one might assume. The problem wasn't the pelts. This was 1985, after all. Fur was still a legitimate part of a luxury wardrobe, at least for the majority of aspirational shoppers. The problem was the idea that fashion would merit inclusion in a museum. So it was a pointed choice that Maria Grazia Chiuri, for her first couture show for Fendi, decided to eschew Paris to recreate that exhibition in the exact same museum and with almost the exact same display, to show what has changed and what has stayed the same. It's shocking now to see fur on a runway, even if, as at Fendi, all that mink and sable and fox has been upcycled, repurposed from pieces in the archives, brought back from clients, or just bits and pieces lying around. On the other hand, there's a lot less of it in the current collection than there used to be, and a whole idea of craft that has been broadened to reach far beyond skins to velvet, silk, lace, and so on. Or at least that's what Chiuri's couture show, also held in the museum, demonstrated. Like the sketches and piecework on the walls and the vitrines of the fashion exhibition, her clothing offered an argument of their own about what exactly qualifies as, if not art, at least as couture. If in her former job as creative director of Christian Dior, she made feminism central to her vision. For better and sometimes worse, in her new post, she seems to be elevating materials in the same way. It might be a more convincing sell. Indeed, Chiuri said in a preview, since taking charge at Fendi last fall, she has realized the material is part of the process of creating. It's really the starting point, and that, she said, was unlike her experience at any other couture house, where design begins with the structure and the fabric follows. At Fendi, she said, the structure serves the fabric. So much so that when a reporter asked about the construction of a garment, Chiuri laughed. There is no construction, she said. She wasn't exaggerating. There also weren't any bright colors, big gowns, or sparkles. There were barely even any waists. What there was a minimalist, monochrome parade of liquid pants and caftans, a focus on tactility, and feeling how fabric slithers against or floats around skin. Above almost everything else, the occasional menswear look and intricately worked fabrics. A simple black dress that began as Chantilly lace then segued into the same lacy whirls but in leather. A long, almost hippie-like vest was composed of hundreds of tiny white fur petals. There were robe-like jackets and transparent 1920s shifts atop slick white trousers. The kind of clothes that don't necessarily telegraph art, but definitely telegraph art collector. Lightness as a value in clothing has been parroted by so many designers this past week that it has started to seem like a cliche. Yes, when the world is heavy, you want to go easy and yada yada yada. But in this case, it was a legitimate description of what was on the Fendi runway. Not just because so many looks seem to be a single layer of sheer mousseline atop little lace nothings, that is less lightness than semi-nudity, but because Chiuri seems to have genuinely figured out how to take on the weighty history of a brand that was never much about shape or even logo, but rather raw material, and instead of ignoring it or apologizing for it, redefine it. After all, when Lagerfeld defiantly introduced couture into the brand 11 years ago, it wasn't couture, it was haute fourrure, or high fur. And outside the venue, there were protests and a buggy covered in fake blood. Now, almost every other house has renounced the stuff. Chiuri, however, has found another way. That's progress. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. How the Swift-Kelsey effect may be coming to a wedding near you. Trends are likely to emerge from the spectacle that was the July 3rd celebration at Madison Square Garden. By Shivani Vora. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's wedding may be over, but its impact on wedding trends has only just begun. Many elements of the pop star and football player's nuptials are likely to find their way into weddings for years to come. From the fashion to the menus, from the venues to even the values. Celebrity weddings are already influential, of course. According to a February 2026 study by the wedding planning platform Joy, 4 in 10 engaged couples said celebrity weddings have directly influenced their planning, while 1 in 10 couples said they have modeled their entire wedding after a celebrity's. Melissa Ames, a co-author of How Pop Culture Shapes the Stages of a Woman's Life, said the effect of celebrity unions on regular weddings dates back to the 1840s, when it is believed that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's wedding popularized the white gown. And today, the speed at which such celebrity unions impact the wedding market has only increased with the advent of technology and the prevalence of social media, she added. Here are 8 ways that industry experts believe the Swift-Kelsey wedding may impact weddings in the years ahead. Unexpected venues. Madison Square Garden in New York City is an extreme example, but Swift and Kelsey's decision to transform a sporting and entertainment arena into a wedding venue could inspire more couples to do something similar, albeit on a smaller scale. According to Zola's 2026 First Look report, which surveyed more than 11,500 couples who are marrying this year, the desire for non-traditional spaces, such as museums and art galleries, had somewhat cooled. But the Swift-Kelsey wedding could help bring them back in style. Robert Fowler, founder of the Atlanta-based event planning company RLF III, said that within 24 hours of the celebration, he had received half a dozen inquiries from couples planning 2027 weddings about unconventional venues. According to Fowler, they all said they want something different like Taylor's. rethinking the wedding party. The bride and groom's decision to skip bridesmaids and groomsmen and instead have a man of honor for the bride, Swift's brother, Austin Swift, and a best man, Kelsey's brother, Jason Kelsey, reflects how modern weddings are rejecting rigid traditions, said Ames, the pop culture expert. Colin Cowie, the event planner who worked on Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck's nuptials in the summer of 2022, said that breaking from the wedding party tradition was super modern and puts less pressure on the couple. Lopez and Affleck did the same in favor of their respective children. Now it's something he plans to regularly raise with future couples. Giving back. The announcement of Swift and Kelsey's $26 million in donations to at least 20 charities, including City Harvest in New York and Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, coincided with the festivities. More couples are already making philanthropy a larger part of their weddings, and now that pattern is likely to accelerate, experts say. Zola reports that 16% of couples were giving to charity in some way this year, up from 5% in 2025. As with everything Taylor and Travis do, said Emily Forrest Skurnick, the head of communications at Zola, we can expect their charitable giving to inspire couples to very loudly and proudly ask their guests to support a cause that's meaningful to them. Joy data indicated that in 2025, charitable donations were an average of $747 per celebration. So far in 2026, the average amount is $1,350. More immersive design. The trees that were delivered to Madison Square Garden before the Swift-Kelsey wedding fueled reports that the venue had been transformed into something botanical, and not at all like the usual interior of MSG. Colby West, an event designer in Knoxville, Tennessee, said that lush greenery and florals would echo their engagement setting. Their proposal took place under a stunning 20-foot domed arboretum draped in an array of flowers like roses and lilies, he said. It's clear that the wedding is a natural continuation of the design language. West expects more couples to emulate this aesthetic. Romantic arches, cascading greenery, and organic floral installations resonate, he added, because they feel genuine and unstaged. Zola's report showed that searches for garden-themed wedding designs continue to rise, and now, after the delivery of boxes marked Garden Party to the arena, Skurnick said, we expect this trend to become even more popular. Unplugged weddings. Swift and Kelsey's strict no-phone policy might have been primarily to avoid leaks to the media, but it also speaks to a growing shift towards unplugging weddings. Zola's report, for one, found that 53% of couples would have no-phone nuptials in 2026. It's ironic that at a time when wedding planning has never been more online, more than half of couples are choosing to have unplugged weddings, Skurnick said. Couples want their wedding day to be the one moment when everyone puts their phone away to be fully present. Leaning into black tie. The star-studded procession of guests wearing sharp tuxedos and floor-length gowns to the wedding left little doubt that it was a black tie affair. Mark Ingram, a luxury bridal designer who has an atelier in New York, said dress codes for weddings had become loosey-goosey in recent years, including brides letting bridesmaids pick their own dresses. A black tie dress code guarantees some civility, formality, and control around the dress code, he said. I've had several of my brides complain about how their guests dressed at their weddings, but they were hesitant to mandate a black tie dress code. Local restaurants as caterers. Sartiano's, an Italian restaurant at the Mercer Hotel in Soho, where the couple had been photographed, catered Swift and Kelsey's 100-person rehearsal dinner on Thursday night. The menu included focaccia with whipped ricotta, meatballs, caviar cannoli, and spaghetti arrabbiata. Fowler, the event planner in Atlanta, said couples have increasingly turned to their favorite restaurants for catering over the last few years. It makes the event much more personal. Changing the wedding calendar. Saturday has been long considered the preferred day for weddings, but Swift and Kelsey's Friday wedding means that Friday could become the new Saturday, said Cowie, the wedding planner behind Lopez and Affleck's celebration. For anyone wanting to save money, it's a less expensive day to get married, plus the best musicians and photographers are all booked on a Saturday, he said. A Friday night wedding opens up a new opportunity. Their July wedding could also revive interest in marriages during this month, a reversal from the pattern today. Zola's data shows that only 7% of weddings in the U.S. take place in July, far less than in June and October. A wedding is this high profile has the power to inspire more couples to see July as the perfect time to celebrate, Skurnik said. It's possible, she added, that some Swifties may even choose to share the anniversary in the years to come. A third of young adults still live with their parents. The share of those under age 35 and waking up in their childhood bedroom has returned to pandemic levels. By Daniela Gorney. In some parts of the world, living at home with parents into your 30s is common, but in the United States, it often comes with embarrassment or shame. Nevertheless, a third of adults under age 35 are living with their parents, according to a recent report by Realtor.com. In 2020, the share of young adults living with their parents peaked at about 34%, the disruption of the pandemic largely to blame. By 2022, it dropped back down to between 31 and 32%, roughly where it had hovered since 2012. The lull did not last, and by 2025, 33% of young adults were living back at home, nearly matching the pandemic-era level. The data is not surprising. Renting or buying feels increasingly unattainable for many. A grim job market, inflation, and lagging wages and public benefits can make moving out of childhood home daunting. Yet most young adults living at home are working, and a growing percentage are college educated. The employment rate for this demographic has remained relatively stable, said Hannah Jones, the senior economist at Realtor.com, who wrote the report. But the share of adults living at home has still increased. This suggests the trend is more about housing affordability and supply than about jobs. Even if moving back home wasn't the plan, some young adults are leaning into its advantages. After a close friend died, Evan Walsh, 30, moved back in with parents earlier this year. Spending time with my family has been so healing for me during this process of loss and transition. And because I've been able to do that, I'm finally in a place where I'm able to focus on my career without having to worry about money as much. His mother, Wendy Walsh, 61, did not expect her son to return, but saw the bright side. I worked so much when he was little, so it's nice to be able to spend more time together, she said. Also making the best of her situation is Francesca Gullo, 28, who grew up in Brooklyn and moved out at 17. After 10 years on her own in New York, she decided to move back in with her parents who had relocated to Tennessee and go back to school. I was working 2 jobs, and I still could not keep up financially. I realized that I did not want to wake up at 35 and have no money saved, said Ms. Gullo. It is a very sucky feeling to know that I may never be able to afford to live where I grew up, but I'm grateful that I have this option and that my parents are supportive. And while a lot of parents welcome their children back, some also believe there has to be a good enough reason for their return. If something tragic happens, of course you're going to open up your doors, said Miss Walsh, But if you're just living at home at 35 because it's expensive, I personally don't find that acceptable. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Modern love. He annoyed me, which is exactly what I needed in a man. My anxiety made it too hard to date. Then I met a perfectly irritating guy on Bumble. By Jenny Singer. From a tote bag, my Bumble date produced a bottle of wine and 2 plastic champagne flutes. He removed the cork, steadied the flutes, and decanted the wine, all while lecturing me on the subject of my college thesis. It was a sunny day in Lower Manhattan, and it was our first date. As his dog lolled on the grass, he described his own college thesis, written 2 years earlier. Reading it, he suggested, would do me good. After an hour, I said I needed to go. Wait, he said. He wanted a coffee. Would I stay with his dog while he popped into a nearby cafe? Soon I was holding a leash, standing under scaffolding, my back to the coffee shop where he had disappeared 10 minutes earlier. The dog inched away from me, looking back over his shoulder in polite horror as people bustled past. Finally, he emerged empty-handed. "Where's your coffee?" I asked. "Oh," he said with a shrug, "I took my espresso indoors." He pronounced it espresso. Long before I went on Bumble, generalized anxiety disorder had come to control my life. It acted like a shock collar as I approached new or even familiar experiences. My heart raced as I performed mundane tasks, such that I felt crazed with foreboding as I approached the kitchen to toast a slice of bread. The idea of approaching someone in a bar or at a party has always immobilized me with panic. Dating apps seemed like an absurd hack, a way to meet through the safety of writing rather than making eye contact across a crowded room. Still, I arrived at every first date feeling nauseated at the idea of being observed and evaluated by a stranger. But by the time the overpriced cocktails arrived, I was usually enjoying myself. It was diverting to spend 90 minutes at an underground speakeasy or axe-throwing establishment, exchanging low-stakes opinions with a guy named Jake. I listened as guys opened up about their relationships, their weird recurring dreams, their feelings about God. There was safety in the customs and unspoken rules of first dates. We would meet, chat, then return to our lives and usually never speak again. First dates acted like exposure therapy on my social anxiety, but I balked at the idea of second and third dates. Running out of topics, having gastrointestinal distress in another person's apartment, spending uninterrupted hours just being together. Dating required an intimacy that felt impossible to me. But with my Bumble date, I felt a strange relaxation. I would go to his apartment and drink red wine, tuning out while he held forth on Nabokov. We took his dog for walks in the West Village. He introduced me to obscure TV comedies, and we laughed at the same jokes. His lack of self-awareness meant that I didn't obsess over my facial expressions or word choice. I didn't feel closely observed because he wasn't closely observing me. His apartment became my refuge from anxiety. My friends were concerned. Why was I spending so much time with a man who seemed indifferent to me? "You must have feelings for him," they said. Was I secretly in love with him? I couldn't locate anything but a sense of companionship mixed with irritation. I invited him to my 25th birthday. He showed up with soft cheese and a baguette. He limited himself to just one irrelevant political rant. I observed him chatting with my friends, watching as they transformed from skeptical to outraged, then endeared. Have to admit, I love him, one whispered. He's actually funny, another texted. Under his veneer of confidence and condescension, a delightful person was emerging. We didn't have romantic feelings for each other, but it felt like we weren't just hooking up. We were becoming friends. Then he met someone, and we stopped hanging out. Then they broke up, and we started spending time together again. Sometimes I dated, and when those relationships dissolved, I found my way back to my Bumble date. This pattern continued for years. My anxiety continued too. I went to therapy and took medication, but I was still accompanied by a sense that I was in danger and that my job was to remain vigilant. One night, I arrived at his apartment on the brink of a panic attack. "Sit down," he said, and then imperiously, "I'm going to lead you in some breathing exercises." With the confidence of a Zen master, he did. Another night, I knocked on his door after a party in distress. "I'm never going to be successful," I said tearfully. "I'm scared to talk to people." "Of course you're going to be successful," he said. "Let's make a plan for your career." Then he fell in love. Not with me. I met her at his birthday party. She was funny and gorgeous. After I chatted with her, I pulled him aside and told him how much I liked her. "Look at us," he said. By then, we had known each other for 5 years, 6 apartments, most of our 20s. There were times when I had found him insufferable and times when he had been a balm to me. "I love you," he said, laughing. "I love you too," I said. We looked at each other, startled by our platonic affection. During the pandemic, I moved to San Francisco, and he and I traded occasional texts. One day, he texted to say he was getting married. Did I know any rabbi who might be willing to do a last-minute interfaith wedding in Brooklyn? I tried once again to take an honest inventory of my heart for evidence that I had harbored feelings for him all along. All I found was happiness for him, and a list of potential rabbis. When COVID vaccines were in wide distribution, I re-downloaded the dating apps. I had a new therapist who did cognitive behavioral therapy. Over Zoom, I told her about my most recent first date. It had gone so well that I felt preemptive despair. My date had talked about wealth redistribution and novels. He asked questions and listened to my answers. I felt exposed under the intensity of his attention. "I want to see him again," I told her, but there was a problem. He had asked me to dinner. I imagined a date at a restaurant like a visit to a haunted house, each element designed to frighten. I would be too nauseated to eat. We would have to maintain eye contact through multiple courses. Afterward, he might want to come over. How would I keep up a pretense of normalcy over such a long period of time? "It sounds like it's time for a behavioral experiment," she said. She told me that I should go to dinner and then invite him to come home with me. "Don't seduce him," she said. "Instead, you should serve him a small bowl of carrots." In the video feed on Zoom, I watched myself roll my eyes and shudder. On the way to dinner, vibrating with anxiety, I thought about my Bumble guy. Over the years, he had become the person I spent the most time around in intimate settings. I had been anxious and rude, boring and gross, and it always had been fine. The man I served the small bowl of carrots to became my boyfriend. When I told him I suffered from anxiety disorder, he said he did too. When I shared that my anxiety was causing shortness of breath, he said, "That happens to me too. It's the worst." When my heart raced, he said, "Let's go outside and run wind sprints." We settled on a yoga flow. We moved in together and took turns leaving the apartment so the other person could Zoom with their therapist. After months of discussing every possible pitfall, we scheduled our mutual proposal on our shared Google Calendar. During the wedding planning process, we take turns panicking. A hallmark anxiety disorders is wanting a level of certainty that is incompatible with real life. An anxious person wants to know that nobody is angry at her, that she is not dying, that nothing is going to go wrong ever. Loving another anxious person has not resolved these concerns. We can make vows to each other, but we cannot predict the future. As my therapist liked to say when I described potential future calamities, can't know. When I look at my partner and am shocked afresh by my luck, I think about the unlikely characters who helped me learn how to be with him, the friends who listened as I processed, the therapist who challenged my thinking, the dating app algorithms that pushed us together, and my annoying Bumble date, who helped me practice being with another person long enough to love them. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 12th issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 10 of We the Women by Nora O'Donnell. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading